Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls her age. While her classmates spent their afternoons shopping or gossiping about boys, she could be found at the local gym, pushing iron that most grown men struggled with. At 22, she stood 5 feet 8 inches tall with a lean, muscular frame that spoke of countless hours of dedicated training. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her brown eyes held a determination that made people take notice. Growing up in a military family in San Diego, Sarah had been surrounded by stories of heroism and service from an early age. Her father, Colonel James Martinez, had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, and her older brother Miguel was a Marine Corps sergeant stationed in North Carolina. The walls of their modest home were lined with commendations, unit photos, and American flags, but it was the stories of the Navy SEALs that captivated Sarah the most. She remembered being 12 years old when her father's friend, Chief Petty Officer Dave Thompson, visited their home. Dave was a SEAL who had just returned from a classified mission overseas. As he sat in their living room, still bearing the tan lines from his tactical gear, he told stories that made Sarah's heart race. He spoke of swimming through frigid waters in the dead of night, of parachuting behind enemy lines, of the brotherhood that bound these elite warriors together. That night, as Sarah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she made a decision that would define the rest of her life. The problem was that women weren't allowed in combat roles, let alone in the SEALs. But Sarah refused to let that stop her from preparing. She threw herself into physical training with an intensity that worried her parents. Every morning at 5 a.m., she would run 6 miles along the beach, her feet pounding against the sand as the sun rose over the Pacific. She learned to swim in the rough surf, staying in the water until her lips turned blue and her fingers went numb. She studied military tactics, memorized weapon specifications, and learned to navigate using only a compass and map. Her high school classmates thought she was crazy. "Why are you training like that?" they would ask. "You can't even join the military in a combat role." But Sarah would just smile and continue with her routine. She graduated valedictorian and immediately enlisted in the Navy, knowing that things might change someday. Sarah's 4 years in the Navy were a masterclass in preparation. She served as a Navy diver, one of the few roles open to women that came close to the physical demands she craved. She excelled in every training exercise, often outperforming her male counterparts. Her commanding officers took notice, writing glowing fitness reports that described her as an exceptional sailor with unlimited potential. But Sarah's eyes were always on a bigger prize. In 2013, when she was 26, everything changed. The Department of Defense announced that all combat positions would be open to women, provided they could meet the same standards as men. Sarah was at her apartment when the news broke on CNN. She had been doing pull-ups on a bar mounted in her doorway, and she literally dropped to the floor when she heard the announcement. After years of waiting, her dream was finally within reach. The next morning, Sarah walked into her commanding officer's office and submitted her request for BUD/S training. BUD/S, or Basic Underwater Demolition/SEAL Training, was the grueling 6-month program that transformed ordinary sailors into Navy SEALs. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Hayes looked at the paperwork with raised eyebrows. "Are you sure about this, Martinez?" she asked. "This isn't just any training program. The failure rate is over 70%, and that's for men who've been preparing their whole lives." Sarah straightened her shoulders and looked her superior officer in the eye. "Ma'am, I've been preparing my whole life too." The approval process took months. Sarah's request had to go up through multiple levels of command, with each officer questioning whether she was ready for what lay ahead. During this time, she intensified her training even further. She hired a former SEAL instructor named Master Chief John Rodriguez, who put her through workouts that left her crawling to her car. He made her carry logs down the beach, forced her to do endless hours of calisthenics in the sand, and taught her the mental techniques she would need to survive the psychological torture that was part of SEAL training. "The physical part is only half of it," Master Chief Rodriguez told her one evening as they sat on the beach after a particularly brutal session. "They're going to try to break you mentally. They're going to tell you that you don't belong, that you're taking a spot away from a man who could do the job better. You need to be ready for that." Sarah nodded, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I've been hearing that my whole life, Master Chief. I'm ready." Finally, in March 2014, Sarah received her orders. She was to report to the Naval Special Warfare Training Center in Coronado, California for Bud/S Class 314. She would be the first woman ever to attempt SEAL training. The news leaked to the media within days, and suddenly Sarah found herself at the center of a national debate about women in combat roles. The night before she was to report for training, Sarah's father called her. "Mija," he said, using the Spanish nickname he'd called her since childhood, "I want you to know that whatever happens, your mother and I are proud of you. You're about to do something that no woman has ever done before." "I know, Dad," Sarah replied, looking out her apartment window at the lights of Coronado across the bay. "I've been waiting for this moment my whole life." The next morning, Sarah drove through the gates of the Naval Special Warfare Training Center for the first time as a student. The base was buzzing with activity as Class 314 prepared to begin their journey. She parked her car and grabbed her sea bag, taking a deep breath of the salty air. This was it. Everything she had worked for, everything she had dreamed about, was about to begin. As she walked toward the barracks where she would spend the next 6 months, Sarah passed a group of male sailors who were also reporting for Bud/S. One of them, a tall blonde man with the build of a football player, nudged his friend as she walked by. "Look at that," he said loud enough for her to hear. "They're really going to let a girl try this. I give her a week before she quits." Sarah kept walking, her jaw set with determination. She had heard comments like that before, and she would hear many more in the months ahead. But she had come too far to let anyone's doubts affect her now. She was about to embark on the most challenging experience of her life, and she was ready for whatever the SEALs could throw at her. The first thing Sarah noticed about the Bud/S compound was how serious everything felt. This wasn't like regular Navy training, where there might be some joking around or casual conversation. Here, every instructor looked like they could bench press a small car, and they all had the same intense look in their eyes. These were men who had been through hell and come out stronger, and now it was their job to put the next generation through the same crucible. Class 314 consisted of 180 students, and Sarah was the only woman. As they gathered for their first briefing, she could feel the eyes of every man in the room on her. Some looked curious, others skeptical, and a few appeared openly hostile. She found a spot in the middle of the group and stood at attention, refusing to let their stares affect her confidence. The class instructor, Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Williams, was a legend in the SEAL community. He had been deployed 8 times, had more combat decorations than Sarah could count, and had a reputation for being harder than a coffin nail. As he looked over the class, his eyes lingered on Sarah for just a moment longer than the others. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying across the room like a crack of thunder. "And lady, welcome to Bud/S. Over the next 6 months, we are going to push you beyond anything you thought was possible. We are going to break you down and build you back up. Most of you will quit. That's not a threat, it's a statistical fact. But those of you who make it through will earn the right to wear the trident and call yourselves SEALs." He paused and looked directly at Sarah. "Now, I know there's been a lot of talk about having a woman in this class. Let me make something clear to all of you. There are no different standards here. Everyone will be held to the same requirements. Everyone will face the same challenges. And everyone will have the same opportunity to succeed or fail. The only thing that matters here is whether you can meet the standard." After the briefing, the class was divided into boat crews of 7 men each. Sarah was assigned to Boat Crew 2, led by a petty officer named Jake Morrison. Jake was a former college wrestler from Oklahoma who had enlisted in the Navy to pay for school and found himself drawn to the challenge of SEAL training. He was fair-minded and respected by his peers, which made him the perfect person to help Sarah integrate into the team. The other members of Boat Crew 2 had mixed reactions to having a woman on their team. Tom Bradley, a former college football player from Texas, was openly skeptical. "I'm not trying to be mean," he told the crew during their first meeting. "But if she can't keep up, we're all going to pay for it." Marcus Johnson, a quiet African-American sailor from Detroit, took a different approach. "Let's just see what she can do before we judge," he said. "If she's here, she must have something." The first week of Bud/S was called Indoctrination Week, or INDOC. It was designed to give students a taste of what was to come while also teaching them the basic procedures and protocols of SEAL training. For Sarah, it was both exciting and nerve-wracking. She was finally here, finally getting the chance she had dreamed of for so long. But she was also acutely aware that everyone was watching her, waiting to see if she would be the first to quit. The physical training during indoc was challenging but manageable for someone of Sarah's fitness level. The real test would come during first phase, which would begin the following week with Hell Week, a 5-day period of continuous training designed to break the will of anyone who wasn't absolutely committed to becoming a SEAL. As Indoc Week progressed, Sarah began to prove herself to her boat crew. During their first timed run, she finished third out of the 7 crew members. When they had to carry their inflatable boat over their heads for miles of beach runs, she pulled her weight without complaint. During swimming exercises in the frigid Pacific, she outlasted several of her male teammates. Slowly, the attitude of Boat Crew 2 began to change. Tom Bradley, who had been the most vocal skeptic, started to warm up to her. "She's tougher than I thought," he admitted to Jake Morrison after a particularly brutal day of training. "Maybe she actually has a shot at this." But not everyone was coming around. Some of the other boat crews remained hostile to her presence. During chow time, she would often eat alone as entire tables of students would get up and move. When she sat down, she heard whispers and comments wherever she went. "She's only here for the publicity," was one common refrain. "She'll quit as soon as it gets really tough," was another. The instructors, meanwhile, were watching Sarah very carefully. They had been told by their chain of command that they were not to make any special accommodations for her, but they were also aware that the entire program was under intense scrutiny from the media and senior Navy leadership. Every interaction with Sarah had to be by the book, professional, and fair. Senior Chief Williams found himself impressed by Sarah's performance during Indoc Week. She had met every standard, shown good teamwork skills, and demonstrated the kind of mental toughness that was essential for SEAL training. But he also knew that Indoc Week was just the beginning. The real test would come during Hell Week, when students would be pushed to their absolute physical and mental limits. On Friday afternoon of Indoc Week, the class gathered for a final briefing before Hell Week would begin. Senior Chief Williams stood before them with a serious expression. "Tomorrow night at midnight, Hell Week begins," he announced. "For the next 5 days, you will get maybe 4 hours of sleep total. You will be cold, wet, sandy, and miserable. You will question every decision that brought you to this point. Many of you will ring the bell and quit, but for those who make it through, you will have taken the first real step toward earning your trident." He looked around the room, making eye contact with each student. When his gaze fell on Sarah, he saw the same determined look he had seen in successful SEAL candidates for the past 15 years. She was ready for whatever was coming, and he had a feeling she might just surprise everyone. That night, Sarah lay in her rack thinking about the journey that had brought her to this point. Tomorrow would begin the most challenging week of her life. But she felt ready. She had trained for this moment for over a decade, and she wasn't going to let anyone down, especially herself. As she drifted off to sleep, her last thought was a simple one: "Can I try?" She had asked that question, and now she was about to find out if she could do more than just try. She was about to find out if she could succeed. The alarm didn't wake Sarah because she hadn't been sleeping. At 11:45 p.m. on Sunday night, she lay in her rack fully clothed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of nervous breathing from her classmates. Some were snoring, trying to grab every last minute of sleep they could get. Others, like her, were wide awake, their minds racing with anticipation and anxiety. At exactly midnight, the barracks erupted in chaos. Instructors burst through the doors, screaming at the top of their lungs, banging pots and pans and firing machine guns loaded with blank ammunition. Red flares lit up the night sky, and the acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. "Get up! Get up! Get up!" the instructors yelled. "Hell Week starts now!" Sarah rolled out of her rack and immediately hit the ground for push-ups along with the rest of Class 314. The instructors were everywhere, screaming in their faces, demanding more speed, more intensity. Within minutes, the entire class was outside in the cold California night air, being herded toward the beach like cattle. "Welcome to Hell Week, ladies," screamed Instructor Petty Officer Rick Santana, his face inches from Sarah's as she did jumping jacks in the sand. "For the next 5 days, we own your sorry lives. You will do exactly what we say, when we say it, or you will ring that bell and get the hell out of my program. The bell. Sarah had seen it during Indoc week, mounted on a wooden post near the instructor's hut. It was a simple brass bell, but it represented defeat. Students who wanted to quit would ring the bell 3 times, place their helmet on the ground, and walk away from SEAL training forever. During Indoc week, only 2 students had rung the bell. But Hell Week would claim many more. The first evolution was surf torture. The entire class was ordered to link arms and sit in the frigid Pacific Ocean as waves crashed over their heads. The water temperature was 58 degrees, and within minutes everyone was shivering violently. The instructors walked up and down the line, taunting the students and looking for signs of weakness. "Martinez!" Senior Chief Williams called out, stopping in front of Sarah. "How are you feeling? Ready to quit yet? Nobody would blame you. This is a man's job." Sarah looked up at him through chattering teeth, her lips blue from the cold. "Hooyah! Senior Chief," she managed to say, using the SEAL battle cry. "Feeling great." For 6 hours, they sat in the surf. Students began to drop like flies, stumbling out of the water and ringing the bell. By dawn, Class 314 had lost 15 men. But Sarah remained, her jaw clenched tight to keep her teeth from chattering, her arms linked with Tom Bradley on one side and Marcus Johnson on the other. When they were finally allowed out of the water, the real Hell Week began. For the next 18 hours straight, they did continuous physical training, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, flutter kicks, and countless other exercises, all performed in the sand while instructors screamed criticism and encouragement in equal measure. The boat races were particularly brutal. Each boat crew had to carry their heavy inflatable boat over their heads while running along the beach. The boats weighed over 200 pounds, and after hours of carrying them, everyone's shoulders were raw and bleeding. Sarah's Boat Crew 2, struggled during the first few races. They were coming in 4th or 5th place out of the remaining 25 crews, which meant extra punishment in the form of additional physical training. "What's the matter with you people?" Instructor Chief Petty Officer Maria Rodriguez screamed at them after another poor showing. "Are you going to let Martinez drag you down? Maybe she should quit now and save you all the embarrassment." The comment hit Sarah like a punch to the gut, but it also made her angry. She had been pulling her weight and more, but the instructors were using her presence to motivate the men in her crew. It was a clever psychological tactic, but it hurt nonetheless. That's when Jake Morrison, their boat crew leader, stepped up. "Belay that, Chief," he said, surprising everyone with his boldness. "Martinez has been keeping up with all of us. If we're losing, it's because we're not working as a team, not because of her." Chief Rodriguez's eyes flashed with anger at being challenged. But she also looked impressed by Jake's leadership. "Is that so, Morrison? Well, let's see if your team can back up that mouth of yours. Next race is for double or nothing. You win, and your crew gets an extra hour of sleep tonight. You lose, and you spend the night doing push-ups in the surf." The next boat race covered 4 miles of beach. Sarah's crew huddled together before the start, strategizing like they were planning a military operation. "Look," Jake said, "we need to find a rhythm and stick to it. Sarah, I want you calling cadence. You've got the loudest voice after me." "Me?" Sarah was surprised. "Are you sure? Some of the guys might not like taking orders from a woman." Tom Bradley, who had been skeptical of her from the beginning, spoke up. "Martinez, you've earned your spot on this crew. If Jake says you call cadence, then you call cadence." The race began and Sarah's voice rang out over the beach as she called the rhythm for their steps. "Left, left, left, right, left. Keep it tight, stay together." Her crew found their groove, moving as one unit with the boat balanced perfectly over their heads. They passed Boat Crew 5, then Boat Crew 3, steadily working their way up through the pack. Other crews began to notice what Boat Crew 2 was doing. Some of the students from other crews started making comments as they were passed. "Look at that, they're letting the girl run their crew now," one said. "They must be really desperate," added another. But Sarah's crew didn't let the comments affect them. They had found something that worked, and they were going to stick with it. As they approached the final mile, they were in second place, just behind Boat Crew 1, which was led by a former Marine named Staff Sergeant David Kim. "Come on, Crew 2, Sarah called out, her voice hoarse from hours of shouting. "We've got them!" "Dig deep. Hoo-yah!" In the final stretch, Sarah's crew pulled ahead. They crossed the finish line first, dropping their boat in the sand and collapsing in exhaustion. They had won their first race, and more importantly, they had done it as a team. That night, while the other crews did punishment exercises in the cold surf, Boat Crew 2 got their promised extra hour of sleep. But even more valuable than the rest was the confidence they had gained. They had proven that they could compete with anyone, and Sarah had proven that she belonged. The next 4 days of Hell Week blurred together in a haze of exhaustion, cold, and pain. They did midnight swims in the ocean, carrying heavy objects underwater until their lungs burned from lack of oxygen. They crawled through obstacle courses, covered in mud and barbed wire. They carried telephone poles for miles, their shoulders bleeding and their hands cramped from gripping the rough wood. Sarah's performance throughout Hell Week was remarkable. While men around her were dropping out at a steady pace, she kept going. Her boat crew began to rally around her, protecting her when they could and drawing strength from her refusal to quit. By Wednesday, Class 314 had shrunk from 180 students to just 89. The bell had been ringing constantly as exhausted men decided they had reached their limits. The psychological warfare intensified as the week went on. Instructors would single out individual students for special attention, trying to break their will with personal attacks and impossible physical demands. Sarah received more than her share of this treatment. Martinez, Instructor Chief Rodriguez, called out during a particularly brutal session of surf torture on Thursday morning. "I bet your daddy's really disappointed in you right now. His little princess is out here playing soldier when she should be home making babies." The comment was designed to make Sarah angry and cause her to make a mistake or lose her composure. Instead, she used it as fuel. "Hoo-ya, Chief," she responded, her voice strong despite her exhaustion. "My father taught me that quitters never win and winners never quit." By Thursday night, Sarah was hallucinating from exhaustion. She had gotten maybe 3 hours of sleep total since Hell Week began, and her body was running on pure willpower. During a night navigation exercise, she found herself talking to her father, who she imagined was walking beside her in the darkness. "I don't know if I can do this, Dad," she whispered as she stumbled through the sand dunes with her heavy pack. "You can do anything you set your mind to, Mija," her hallucinated father replied. "You've come too far to quit now." Friday morning brought the final evolution of Hell Week, a tradition called So Solly Day. The remaining students were divided into teams and forced to compete in a series of ridiculous and humiliating challenges designed to test their sense of humor and mental resilience. They had to sing songs, perform skits, and endure the instructor's final attempts to break their spirits. Sarah's team was required to perform a skit about pirates, with her playing the role of the captain. As she stood on a makeshift stage made of wooden pallets, wearing a cardboard hat and holding a foam sword, she looked out at the instructors and remaining students. She was filthy, exhausted, and probably looked like she had been through a war, but she was still here. "Our mateys," she said in her best pirate voice. "We may be tired, we may be cold, but we're still here, and we're not going anywhere." The crowd of students cheered, and even some of the instructors cracked smiles. Sarah had survived Hell Week, but more than that, she had thrived. She had become a leader among her peers, and had earned the respect of the men who had initially doubted her. At noon on Friday, Senior Chief Williams gathered the surviving members of Class 314 on the beach. There were 47 of them left, down from the original 180. They looked like walking zombies, their eyes hollow from exhaustion and their bodies swaying from fatigue. "Congratulations," Senior Chief Williams said, his voice unusually warm. "You have survived Hell Week. You have proven that you have what it takes to continue in this program. But remember, this is just the beginning. The next 5 months will test you in ways that Hell Week never could." He looked directly at Sarah as he continued. "Some of you came into this week thinking that certain people didn't belong here. I hope this week has taught you that courage and determination don't have a gender. Martinez, you have earned the respect of every instructor in this command, and more importantly, you've earned the respect of your classmates." As the class was dismissed to finally get some real sleep, Tom Bradley approached Sarah. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I was wrong about you. You're as tough as anyone I've ever met." Marcus Johnson nodded in agreement. "You saved our crew this week." We wouldn't have made it without your leadership." Jake Morrison clapped her on the shoulder. "You've got heart, Martinez. Whatever happens in the next phases, you've got my vote of confidence." That night, as Sarah lay in her rack for the first time in 5 days, she reflected on what she had accomplished. She had survived the most notorious week in military training, and she had done it while carrying the weight of being the first woman ever to attempt it. More importantly, she had proven that she belonged here, not just to the instructors and her classmates, but to herself. The media had been following her progress closely, and news of her successful completion of Hell Week made headlines around the world. "Woman Survives Navy SEAL Hell Week," read one headline. "Breaking Barriers. Female Sailor Proves She Belongs with the Elite," read another. But Sarah wasn't focused on the media attention. She was focused on what came next. Hell Week was just the first major hurdle in BUD/S training. The next 5 months would bring underwater testing that claimed many students, land warfare training that pushed their tactical knowledge to the limits, and a final phase that would test everything they had learned. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah thought about the question she had asked all those years ago: "Can I try?" She had gotten her chance to try, and now she was proving that she could do more than just try. She could succeed. The men who had mocked her at the beginning were learning that she wasn't just surviving, she was excelling. But the biggest challenges were still ahead of her. Hell Week had been about physical and mental toughness. The next phases would test her technical skills, her ability to think under pressure, and her capacity to lead other people in life-or-death situations. Sarah was ready for whatever came next. She had come too far to quit now, and she was just getting started. The weeks following Hell Week brought a different kind of challenge for Sarah and the remaining members of Class 314. While Hell Week had been about raw physical endurance and mental toughness, first phase now shifted focus to the technical skills that would define a Navy SEAL's capabilities. Swimming became the primary focus, and it was here that many students would discover their limitations. Pool competency was the first major hurdle. Students had to demonstrate their ability to survive underwater emergencies that could occur during real SEAL operations. The exercises were designed to simulate equipment failures, entanglement scenarios, and combat situations that might require a SEAL to function underwater without normal breathing apparatus. Sarah approached the pool complex with a mixture of confidence and nervousness. She had always been a strong swimmer, but these weren't normal swimming tests. These were life-or-death scenarios played out in a controlled environment, where failure meant elimination from the program. The first exercise was called drown-proofing. Students had their hands tied behind their backs and their feet bound together, then were required to survive in the deep end of the pool for 20 minutes. They had to bob up and down to breathe, swim to the bottom to retrieve objects with their teeth, and perform forward and backward somersaults, all while maintaining control and avoiding panic. Instructor Chief Petty Officer Mike Patterson watched from the pool deck as Sarah entered the water. Patterson was known as one of the toughest swim instructors in the program, a former SEAL who had served multiple deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. He had been skeptical about having a woman in the program, but Sarah's performance during Hell Week had earned his grudging respect. "Remember, Martinez," he called out as she struggled to maintain her position in the water with her limbs bound, "panic is your enemy. Control your breathing, control your mind, and the water becomes your friend." Sarah bobbed up and down in the pool, fighting the natural instinct to struggle against her restraints. The key was to use the water's buoyancy to her advantage, to find a rhythm that would allow her to breathe regularly while conserving energy. She had practiced similar exercises during her years of preparation, but this was different. This was the real test. Around her, other students were having varying degrees of success. She could hear some of them breathing heavily, fighting panic as they struggled to maintain control. 2 students had already been pulled from the water by safety divers. Their dreams of becoming SEALs ended by their inability to master this basic survival skill. Sarah found her rhythm and settled into the exercise. She focused on her breathing, timing her movements to maximize the air she could get with each breath. When it came time to retrieve objects from the bottom of the pool, she dove down smoothly, using her core strength to propel herself through the water despite her bound limbs. 20 minutes later, when the exercise ended, Sarah had completed every requirement. She wasn't the best performer in the class, but she had met the standard, and that was all that mattered. As she climbed out of the pool, she noticed several of her classmates looking at her with newfound respect. "Not bad for a girl," joked Kevin Walsh, a former college swimmer from Boston who had struggled more than Sarah with the exercise. "Not bad for anybody," corrected Marcus Johnson, who had become one of Sarah's strongest supporters. That was solid work. The underwater harassment exercise came next, and this was where many students met their match. Each student had to swim underwater across the length of the pool, while instructors attempted to remove their diving mask, pull out their regulator, and tie their air hoses in knots. The goal was to teach students to remain calm under extreme stress while solving potentially life-threatening problems underwater. Sarah descended into the pool wearing scuba gear, her movements smooth and controlled. She had barely made it halfway across when Instructor Patterson dove down and yanked her mask off her face. Immediately, salt water rushed into her eyes and nose, but she maintained her composure. She knew that panic would kill her faster than any equipment failure. As she continued swimming blind, she felt hands grabbing at her regulator. The instructor pulled it from her mouth and tied her air hose in a complex knot. Now she was underwater, blind, and unable to breathe from her primary air source. This was the moment when many students panicked and shot to the surface, ending their SEAL aspirations. Sarah forced herself to remain calm. She had trained for this exact scenario hundreds of times with Master Chief Rodriguez during her preparation. She felt along her body for her backup regulator, cleared it of water, and began breathing normally again. Then she worked methodically to untie the knot in her air hose, her fingers moving with practiced precision despite the stress of the situation. Within 2 minutes, she had solved all the problems the instructors had created. She found her mask, cleared it of water, and continued her underwater swim to the far end of the pool. When she surfaced, she saw Instructor Patterson looking at her with something approaching approval. "Good work, Martinez," he said simply. That's how a SEAL handles problems underwater, but not all of Sarah's classmates were as successful. Over the next few days, the pool exercises claimed victim after victim. Students who had survived Hell Week found themselves unable to master the technical underwater skills required of SEALs. By the end of the first month of first phase, Class 314 had shrunk from 47 students to just 32. The academic portion of first phase presented Sarah with a different kind of challenge. SEALs needed to master a wide range of subjects from hydrographic reconnaissance to explosives handling to small unit tactics. The classroom sessions were intense, with instructors expecting students to absorb complex information quickly and apply it under pressure. Sarah excelled in the academic environment. Her years of studying military tactics and her natural intelligence served her well. She consistently scored in the top 10% of the class on written exams, and her performance during practical exercises was equally impressive. During a navigation exercise, she successfully led her team through a complex route using only a compass and map, arriving at the objective ahead of schedule and without being detected by opposing forces. The weapons training phase of first phase was where Sarah truly began to separate herself from her peers. Growing up in a military family, she had been shooting since she was 8 years old. Her father had taught her to respect firearms and to handle them with precision and safety. Now, as she trained with the weapons systems used by SEALs, her natural ability shone through. On the rifle range, Sarah consistently shot expert scores with the M4 carbine. Her groups were tight, her stance was perfect, and her breathing technique was textbook. Instructor Gunnery Sergeant Robert Hayes, a Marine on loan to the SEAL program, took notice of her performance. "Where did you learn to shoot like that, Martinez?" he asked after she had put 10 rounds through the same hole at 300 yards. "My father, Gunny," Sarah replied. "He said that if I was going to handle a weapon, I needed to be better than good. I needed to be perfect." "Your father was a wise man," Gunnery Sergeant Hayes said. "That kind of precision could save your life and the lives of your teammates someday." The pistol training was equally impressive. Sarah mastered the SEAL's standard sidearm, the SIG Sauer P226, with remarkable speed. She could draw, fire, and hit a target at 25 yards in under 2 seconds. During close-quarters battle training, she moved through shooting houses with fluid precision, engaging multiple targets while maintaining perfect muzzle discipline and trigger control. But it was during the explosives training that Sarah truly shocked her instructors and classmates. SEALs were required to master the use of various explosive devices for both demolition and breaching operations. The training was dangerous and required extreme attention to detail, as a single mistake could result in serious injury or death. Sarah approached explosives training with the same methodical precision she brought to everything else. She memorized the characteristics of different explosive compounds, learned to calculate precise charges for various demolition tasks, and practiced the delicate art of bomb disposal. Her steady hands and calm demeanor made her a natural at the technical aspects of the work. During a practical exercise involving the demolition of a concrete bunker, Sarah was chosen as the team leader for her squad's assault. The exercise required her to calculate the exact amount of C4 explosive needed to breach the wall without causing excessive collateral damage, then lead her team through the breach to secure the objective. Sarah studied the target carefully, measuring the thickness of the concrete and calculating the optimal placement for her charges. She had her team set up security positions while she prepared the explosives, double-checking every connection and timing device. When she was satisfied with her work, she signaled for her team to take cover. The explosion was perfect. The wall was breached cleanly, with minimal debris and smoke. Sarah led her team through the opening in a textbook assault, clearing each room systematically and securing all objectives within the prescribed time limit. The instructors watching the exercise were impressed not just with the technical execution, but with Sarah's leadership under pressure. "Outstanding work, Martinez," said Master Chief Petty Officer Williams after the exercise. "That was one of the best breaching operations I've seen from a student in 10 years. As first phase progressed, Sarah continued to excel in every area. Her physical fitness scores remained in the top 10% of the class. Her academic performance was exemplary, and her leadership skills were becoming evident to everyone around her. But more importantly, she had earned the complete acceptance of her classmates. The boat crews had been reorganized several times as students were eliminated from the program, and Sarah now found herself as the assistant leader of Boat Crew 1, working under Jake Morrison, who had been promoted to class leader. The crew included some of the strongest performers in the class, and they had developed into a cohesive unit that consistently performed at the top of every exercise. "You know what I like about having Sarah on the team?" Tom Bradley said one evening as the crew cleaned their equipment after a long day of training. "She makes all of us better. When you know someone is giving 100% all the time, it makes you want to give 100% too." Marcus Johnson nodded in agreement. "Plus, she's usually right when we're trying to figure out some tactical problem. I've learned to listen when she talks." The transition to second phase brought new challenges and new opportunities for Sarah to prove herself. Second phase focused on land warfare, small unit tactics, and weapons training. It was here that students learned the skills they would need to operate behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence and conducting direct action missions. The field training exercises became more complex and realistic. Students were required to plan and execute multi-day missions in the California desert, operating with minimal sleep and supplies while being hunted by opposing forces played by SEAL instructors. These exercises tested not just physical endurance, but tactical knowledge, leadership ability, and the capacity to make life-or-death decisions under extreme stress. Sarah thrived in the field environment. Her years of studying military tactics paid dividends as she helped plan missions and analyze enemy positions. During one particularly challenging exercise, her patrol was tasked with infiltrating an enemy compound and retrieving sensitive intelligence without being detected. Sarah was chosen to lead the patrol, a responsibility that carried significant weight. If the mission failed, it would reflect poorly not just on her but on every woman who might want to attempt SEAL training in the future. The pressure was enormous, but Sarah had learned to channel pressure into focus. She spent hours studying aerial photographs of the target, analyzing guard patterns, and planning multiple routes of approach and escape. She briefed her team thoroughly, ensuring that every man understood his role and responsibilities. When it came time to execute the mission, her preparation showed. The patrol moved through the desert like ghosts, using natural cover and camouflage techniques to avoid detection. Sarah's navigation was perfect, bringing the team to within 50 meters of the target building exactly on schedule. She positioned her men to provide security and cover while she and one other student infiltrated the compound. Moving through the darkened building required all of her stealth training. Sarah had practiced these skills for years, Learning to move silently across different types of terrain and through various structures, she located the target intelligence in a locked safe, quickly defeated the lock using techniques she had learned during her preparation, and extracted the required documents. The extraction went equally smoothly. Sarah's team moved back through the desert without being detected, arriving at their extraction point with time to spare. The mission was a complete success, accomplished without a single compromise or near detection. "That was exceptional work, Martinez," said Lieutenant Commander Sarah Johnson, one of the few female officers involved in SEAL training. "Your planning was thorough, your execution was flawless, and your leadership kept your team focused and effective. That's the kind of performance we expect from our best students." As second phase continued, Sarah's reputation among the instructors and her classmates continued to grow. She was no longer seen as an experiment or a curiosity. She was seen as one of the top performers in Class 314, a student who might actually have what it takes to become a Navy SEAL. But challenges remained ahead. Third phase would test her ability to function in the maritime environment that was central to SEAL operations. She would need to master advanced diving techniques, underwater navigation, and shipboarding procedures. She would also face the final examinations that would determine whether she had earned the right to wear the SEAL trident. The night before third phase began, Sarah sat on the beach near the Bud/S compound, looking out at the Pacific Ocean. She had come so far from that 12-year-old girl who had dreamed of becoming a SEAL. She had survived challenges that had defeated 148 other students, many of whom had been considered sure bets to complete the program. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new opportunities to prove herself. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had shown that she belonged here, that she could compete with the best of the best. The men who had mocked her months ago now looked to her for leadership and inspiration. "Can I try?" she had asked all those years ago. Now she was proving that she could do much more than just try. She was proving that she could excel, that she could lead, and that she could earn her place among America's most elite warriors. The final phase awaited, and Sarah was ready for whatever challenges it would bring. Third phase of Bud/S training began with a sobering reality check. Of the original 180 students who had started Class 314, only 23 remained. Sarah looked around at her surviving classmates as they gathered for their first briefing of the final phase, recognizing the same determination in their eyes that had carried them through the previous months of training. Master Chief Petty Officer James Sullivan stood before them, his weathered face showing the signs of 25 years in the SEAL teams. He was a legend in the special operations community, having participated in some of the most classified missions of the past 2 decades. His presence alone commanded respect, and when he spoke, every student listened with rapt attention. "Gentlemen, and Martinez," he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen combat in every major conflict since the 1990s. "Welcome to third phase. This is where you learn to become maritime warriors. Everything you've learned up to this point has been preparation for what comes next. In this phase, you'll master the skills that separate SEALs from every other special operations unit in the world." Sarah felt a chill of excitement run down her spine. This was what she had dreamed about for over a decade. The maritime skills that defined the SEALs, the ability to operate from the sea, on the sea, and under the sea, with equal effectiveness. This was where she would learn to become the complete warrior she had always envisioned herself being. The first few weeks of third phase focused on advanced diving techniques. Students learned to use closed-circuit breathing apparatus that left no bubble trail, essential for covert underwater operations. They practiced underwater navigation using only compass and depth gauge, learning to move through the murky waters of San Diego Bay with precision and stealth. Sarah approached the diving training with characteristic intensity. She had always been comfortable underwater, but these techniques required a level of precision and control that was entirely new. The closed-circuit rebreathers were complex pieces of equipment that required constant monitoring and adjustment. A single mistake in gas mixture or absorption of carbon dioxide could result in unconsciousness or death. During her first training dive with the rebreather, Sarah descended to 60 feet in the cold waters of San Diego Bay. The visibility was less than 10 feet, and she had to navigate to a series of underwater checkpoints using only her compass and watch. The exercise simulated an infiltration mission, where a SEAL team might need to approach an enemy position underwater without being detected. As she moved through the dark water, Sarah felt a sense of peace that surprised her. This was where she belonged, operating in an environment that most people found terrifying and alien. She completed the navigation course perfectly, arriving at each checkpoint within the prescribed time limits and surfacing exactly where she was supposed to. "Outstanding work, Martinez," said Master Chief Sullivan as she climbed back onto the dive boat. "You have a natural feel for this environment. That's something that can't be taught." The shipboarding exercises were where Sarah truly began to separate herself from her remaining classmates. These drills simulated the boarding of hostile vessels, requiring students to climb rope ladders in heavy seas while carrying full combat equipment. The exercises were dangerous and physically demanding, testing not just strength and endurance, but coordination and courage. The training took place on an actual ship anchored off the coast of San Diego. Students had to approach the vessel in small boats, then scale the sides using various climbing techniques, while instructors simulated enemy resistance with paintball guns and fire hoses. The goal was to reach the deck of the ship and secure predetermined objectives while under simulated fire. Sarah's first attempt at shipboarding was challenging. The rope ladder swayed violently in the ocean swells, and her heavy equipment made every movement more difficult. Halfway up the ladder, an instructor hit her with a stream of water from a fire hose, nearly knocking her back into the sea. But she held on, adjusting her grip and continuing her climb despite the setback. And she reached the deck. She immediately took cover and began returning simulated fire with her paintball weapon. She moved across the deck with fluid precision, using the ship's superstructure for cover as she advanced toward her objective. Within minutes, she had cleared her assigned section of the ship and secured the target. "That was textbook," said Chief Petty Officer Martinez, no relation. One of the instructors running the exercise. "You maintained your composure under fire, used proper cover and concealment, and executed your mission without hesitation. That's exactly what we're looking for." As the weeks progressed, Sarah continued to excel in every aspect of third phase training. Her performance was not just meeting the standards, but consistently exceeding them. She was becoming the kind of student that instructors used as an example for the rest of the class. During a particularly challenging exercise called hydrographic reconnaissance, Sarah was tasked with leading a team to gather intelligence on a simulated enemy beach. The exercise required her to swim ashore at night, conduct a detailed survey of the landing area, and return to the submarine offshore without being detected by opposing forces. Sarah spent hours planning the mission, studying tide charts, weather reports, and intelligence on enemy positions. She briefed her team thoroughly, ensuring that everyone understood the mission requirements and contingency plans. When it came time to execute, her preparation showed. The team inserted from a submarine 2 miles offshore, swimming through rough seas in complete darkness. Sarah's navigation was perfect, bringing her team to shore exactly at the planned location. They spent 3 hours on the beach, measuring water depth, identifying obstacles, and gathering intelligence on enemy positions, all while avoiding detection by roving patrols. The swim back to the submarine was even more challenging. The seas had picked up, and the team had to navigate through increasingly rough conditions while maintaining radio silence. Sarah kept her team together and on course, using her compass and natural landmarks to find the submarine in the vast darkness of the ocean. When they finally reached the submarine and climbed aboard, the mission had been a complete success. They had gathered all the required intelligence without being detected, and every team member had returned safely. The submarine commander, a veteran SEAL officer, was impressed with Sarah's performance. "That was professional-grade work, Martinez," he said as the team debriefed the mission. "I've seen experienced SEAL platoons perform that same exercise with less precision and effectiveness. You have real potential as a team leader." But it was during the final training exercise that Sarah truly proved she belonged among the elite warriors of the Navy SEALs. The exercise, known as Emerald Warrior, was a full-scale mission simulation that combined every skill learned during the 6 months of Bud/S training. Students were divided into teams and given complex missions that they had to plan and execute over a 3-day period. Sarah was chosen as the overall mission commander for her team, responsible for planning and executing a simulated hostage rescue operation. The mission required her to coordinate air support, naval assets, and ground forces in a complex assault on a fortified position. It was the kind of challenge that tested not just individual skills, but leadership ability under extreme pressure. Sarah approached the planning phase with the methodical precision that had become her trademark. She studied intelligence reports, analyzed satellite imagery, and consulted with subject matter experts on every aspect of the mission. She developed multiple contingency plans, ensuring that her team could adapt to changing conditions without losing mission effectiveness. The briefing she gave to her team was comprehensive and professional. She covered every aspect of the mission, from insertion methods to withdrawal plans, ensuring that every team member understood their role and responsibilities. She welcomed questions and input from her teammates, demonstrating the kind of collaborative leadership style that was essential for special operations success. "This is not just about completing the exercise," she told her team during the final briefing. "This is about proving that we can operate as professional warriors capable of handling real-world missions. We've trained for 6 months for this moment. Now let's show everyone what we can do." The mission execution was flawless. Sarah's team inserted by helicopter under cover of darkness, approaching the target using advanced infiltration techniques learned during second phase. Her coordination of the assault was textbook perfect, with each element of her team executing their assigned roles with precision timing. When they encountered unexpected resistance during the assault, Sarah adapted her plan on the fly, redirecting her team's movements to overcome the new threat without compromising the mission. She maintained communication with all elements of her force, ensuring that the rescue of the simulated hostages proceeded without casualties to either her team or the civilians they were protecting. The entire mission, from insertion to extraction, was completed in under 4 hours. All objectives were achieved, all team members returned safely, and the hostages were rescued without injury. It was the kind of performance that instructors would use as a teaching example for future classes. Master Chief Sullivan was present for the mission debrief, and his feedback was unusually enthusiastic. "That was exceptional work," he said, addressing Sarah directly. "In 25 years of training SEALs, I've seen very few students demonstrate that level of tactical knowledge and leadership ability. You planned and executed that mission like a veteran operator." The final week of Bud/S was both celebratory and nerve-wracking. Students had to complete their final examinations, both written and practical, to demonstrate their mastery of all the skills they had learned. But there was also the growing realization that they were about to achieve something extraordinary. Sarah's final exam scores were among the highest in the class. She scored perfect marks on the written examination covering tactics, weapons, and diving procedures. Her practical examinations were equally impressive, demonstrating mastery of every skill, from small unit tactics to underwater demolition. But the real test came during her final evaluation with the training staff. She sat across from Master Chief Sullivan and 2 other senior instructors as they reviewed her performance over the past 6 months. "Martinez," Master Chief Sullivan began, "when you arrived here 6 months ago, a lot of people wondered whether a woman could meet the standards of this program. Some people, myself included, had doubts about whether the physical and mental demands of SEAL training were something a female could handle." Sarah listened quietly, unsure where this conversation was heading. "But you've proven all of us wrong," he continued. "You haven't just met the standards, you've exceeded them. You've demonstrated leadership, technical proficiency, and the kind of warrior spirit that defines the SEAL teams. More importantly, you've earned the respect of every instructor and student in this program." One of the other instructors, Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, nodded in agreement. "Your performance during the final exercise was outstanding. The way you planned and executed that mission demonstrated tactical knowledge that some experienced SEALs would envy." Master Chief Sullivan leaned forward in his chair. "Martinez, it is the recommendation of this training staff that you be graduated from Bud/S and awarded the Navy SEAL Trident. Congratulations, you've earned it." Sarah felt a rush of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. After 6 months of the most challenging training imaginable, after proving herself over and over again, she had finally achieved her dream. She was going to become a Navy SEAL, the first woman ever to earn that honor. "Thank you, Master Chief," she managed to say, her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. "This has been the greatest honor of my life." The graduation ceremony took place on a perfect Friday morning in September. Family members and friends gathered on the beach at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center to watch as 23 men and 1 woman received their SEAL Tridents. Sarah's parents had flown in from Texas, their faces beaming with pride as they watched their daughter make history. As Sarah stood in formation with her classmates, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From that 12-year-old girl who had dreamed of becoming a warrior, to the young woman who had survived the most demanding military training program in the world, she had never wavered in her determination to prove that courage and capability had no gender. When Master Chief Sullivan pinned the golden trident to her uniform, Sarah felt the weight of history and responsibility. She was no longer just achieving her own dream, she was opening doors for every woman who might follow in her footsteps. "Hooyah, Seal!" Master Chief Sullivan said as he stepped back and saluted her. "Hooyah, Master Chief," Sarah replied, returning the salute with pride. After the ceremony, Sarah's father approached her, tears in his eyes. "Mija, I always knew you could do anything you set your mind to. But this is beyond what I ever imagined possible." Her mother hugged her tightly. "You've made all of us so proud. But more than that, you've shown the world that women can do anything men can do if they're willing to work hard enough for it." The media attention following Sarah's graduation was intense. News outlets around the world covered the story of the first woman to earn the Navy SEAL Trident. She was invited to appear on talk shows, featured in magazine articles, and became a symbol of breaking gender barriers in the military. But for Sarah, the real satisfaction came from the acceptance of her teammates. Tom Bradley, who had been skeptical of her from the beginning, approached her after the ceremony. "Petty Officer Martinez," he said with a grin. "I owe you an apology. When this all started, I thought you were just here for the publicity, but you proved that you belong here more than any of us. You earned this." Marcus Johnson nodded in agreement. "You made all of us better sailors and better men. It's been an honor serving alongside you." Jake Morrison, who had been her boat crew leader throughout training, clapped her on the shoulder. "Sarah, you didn't just break barriers, you shattered them. Every woman who comes after you is going to have an easier path because of what you accomplished." As the celebration continued into the evening, Sarah found herself standing alone on the beach where she had endured so much suffering and achieved so much success. The Pacific Ocean stretched out before her, dark and mysterious, holding secrets and challenges that she was now qualified to face. She thought about the question that had started it all. Can I try? She had gotten her chance to try. And she had done so much more than that. She had succeeded beyond anyone's wildest expectations, including her own. She had proven that determination, preparation, and an unwavering belief in oneself could overcome any obstacle. The men who had mocked her 6 months ago with comments like, "I give her a week before she quits," were now proud to call her their teammate. She had not only met every standard they had set before her, but had excelled at levels that few students ever achieved. Sarah Martinez had become Petty Officer Sarah Martinez, Navy SEAL, the first woman ever to earn that title. But more than that, she had become a symbol of what was possible when barriers were broken and opportunities were given to those willing to fight for them. As she looked out at the ocean that had tested her, challenged her, and ultimately accepted her, Sarah smiled. This was just the beginning. Now she would face the real test, performing as a SEAL in an operational unit, proving that she could not only survive the training but excel in the mission for which she had been trained. She had answered the question, "Can I try?" with a resounding yes. Now she was ready to answer the next question, "Can I serve?" And based on everything she had accomplished, there was no doubt what that answer would be.